Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Edward Tyson, who's the CEO of PerSynergy Consulting and the author of From Expert to Executive. Edward, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Mike. Glad to be here.
Hey, so I want to dive into what you do in your consulting and how you lead and guide your teams and clients, but also want to get a little bit of your entrepreneurial background. And I love the title of your book, From Expert to Executive, because I would think that the typical person would think, well, I'm an executive first and then I move to expert. So I want to talk a little bit about that, transition and transformation that way. So what's your background and what's your entrepreneurial journey been like to this point in your career?
Sure. Well, I guess I got to the seat I'm sitting in today via a bit of a circuitous route. I started off 17 years old in the Marine Corps Reserves, and that allowed me also to pursue my education at the same time. So I studied philosophy at Penn State and then really organizational psychology at Temple University. And then I started in the world of business and eventually climbed that ladder up to the executive level, was vice president of process improvement, vice president of strategy for a large publicly traded healthcare company. And then I helped sell that company, make myself available to the world, and started my own effort called PerSynergy Consulting, where we help drive transformation for individuals in the way of executive coaching, teams in the way of team coaching, and then organizations in the way of strategic planning, organizational design, digital and process improvement, et cetera.
Awesome. And I think it's so interesting that, you started with a military background and that kind of gave structure and the way that you order your day. And I know that now when you're one of the things you talk about on your website, leadership SOPs, structure, operate, perfect. And that really is something that I think people think about from the operations side of things, but you focus it on leadership standard operating procedure. So talk a little bit about how you take that approach to leadership, where I think that many times in my, if you were to ask me, tell me, quick, impression of leadership, it would be most leadership consultants talk about 30,000 foot view and concepts, but an SOP, that's like rolling up your sleeves and getting things done. So you're really diving in deep with that, right?
Boy, I love the connections you're making there because they're exactly my intent. You're right, the military and then a career in healthcare, as well as process improvement being my area of expertise, all rooted me very deeply in an appreciation for standard operating procedures and the idea that all performance is the result of the process that we use. And so as I looked to solve some people puzzles and help leaders engage in leading, I thought immediately about leadership as a process. But to really unravel that, I had to say, well, what is this process then called leading? And if you look up the definition of a process, it's essentially, a series of activities or work done for a particular purpose. So that caused me to dig a little deeper and ask a very important question, which is, what is the work of leading? And because to engage in the process, you have to understand the work. But what I really found on that journey is to understand the work, you have to understand the purpose. And that is where most experts and most people get hung up as they move into leadership positions and grapple with this idea that they must make new room in their hearts and their minds and in their activities, daily activities, for this thing called leadership.
It reminds me of the book, Stephen Covey came out with the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, where he says, begin with the end in mind. Well, with leadership and what you just said, what's the purpose? What's the why? And the Simon Sinek, but it all starts with why. And when you have that why, then it draws you to that goal, and it helps you when you've got to do the stuff, because you know what? Sometimes doing the tactics that need to be done aren't really the fun stuff. So that's why you have to keep yourself focused on that end goal, right?
Absolutely. And from my perspective, getting to that why starts with thinking about, when did you first really conceive of leadership? And I think most of us, for the first time, really experience the purpose of leading when we, grasp a goal or a vision that we cannot achieve alone. And it's in that moment of understanding that in order to do this thing that I have a calling to do, I must create the community of effort necessary to do it. That's kind of that realization. Now, the problem is we are so in love with our goals and our vision that we forget that leadership is all about taking our eyes off that ball and casting them upon that community of effort. And when you understand that, it's easy to understand then that the work of leading is to structure, operate, and perfect that community of effort.
So let's dive in a little bit deeper up underneath the horizon view and talk a little bit about the actual leadership SOPs. So what are the standard operating procedures that you teach in your SOP model?
Oh, great question, because so many people ask me, how many do you have in your list? And the answer is, I don't have any. What I'm encouraging you to do is create your standard operating procedures for structuring and operating your community of effort. And of course, I dig in a little bit deeper to help people find out what those might be by defining the dimensions underneath those three domains of structure, operate, and perfect. And by the way, if you didn't catch on already, that whole SOP mantra is, effectively a mnemonic double entendre, helping you not only remember the idea of standard operating procedures, but that it's structure, operate, perfect, that we should aim those standard operating procedures at. But the model itself goes far deeper.
Okay, so just as a total side note, I'm on your website, and I love, alliterations like that. And so I would say to you, boy, make the words structure, operate, perfect, where the S is bold and the O is bold, so that it really draws that out, because I didn't pick up on that until you just said it. So yeah, SOPs, we think standard operating procedures, and then you see your tagline, oh, okay, that's cool. But then it's like, yes, that ties together. I love that so much.
Yeah, I got to dig deep to find that. And really, I utilized in my framework all over the place acronyms. And the reason is I cannot remember my own model and the depth of it without them.
You got to make it easy for yourself.
Yeah. And so in the early days of building it, I quite simply was trying to make sure that in the midst of a coaching conversation, which frequently they get intense and heated, and how can I helpfully cover the comprehensive nature of leadership? Well, I really can't. It's too deep and too broad without some sort of help in order to do that. And so really the framework itself is the results of my own need to be able to remember, repeat, and cover that information.
Yes. Love it. Yeah, that's really good. It's like, if it helps me, then it'll help other people. Or if it should help other people, then I'm going to make it so I benefit from it too. So here's a question. When I asked you about, well, what are the SOPs? And you're like, there are none. I just teach you what you should be doing so you can create your own. And to me, that feels very interactive. And that feels like, okay, cool. Tell me how to create an SOP. Well, first of all, you need to, and then it's almost like, press pause on the video and go and do this piece, or go, when you're reading this chapter in the book, stop right here and, here's this worksheet and apply this. So I know you probably agree with this statement that knowledge is power is a fallacy, because knowledge is potential power. You got to put it into action. So with that thought in mind, give us an example of an SOP teaching where you go, okay, well, a standard operating procedure would be this. Here's how to do it. And then here's how to apply it to someone in this industry or that. What would be an example of that? Because I think a lot of people might go, I'm kind of like an engineer. I want a checklist and a blueprint, and you're telling me that there is not a SOP. So how do you guide them?
That's right. I've ridden to the rescue and then told you to save yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the old thing, like I'm here from Washington and I'm here to help, or something like that.
Yeah, right. I'm with the IRS and I'm going to help you. Yeah, right.
So, a great example would be, underlying the structured domain. I immediately talk about developing your scope as a leader, and the fact that you need leadership SOPs to identify what your scope is. And, if you've been paying attention to me at all, you already are set for the idea that scope might just be an acronym.
Oh,
and
love it.
It is, of course. And to me, it stands for strategy, culture, objectives, purpose, and ecosystem. And the idea is that most leaders start with that S in strategy, right? It's right up front in the scope, but really to get there, we have to examine our ecosystem, understand what are the interactions that our stakeholders are having in our ecosystem. What are their needs? What are the things that we might be able to add value to that ecosystem, i.e., what's our purpose? And then in understanding that, what are our long-term, mid-term, and short-term objectives? And upon that, what is balancing those objectives from a cultural perspective? And then once you have all that, you're now in a great position to create the strategy. So that's the work. The question is, how will you do it? How do you do it today? Do you do it at all? Who do you do it with? When do you do it? Are you doing it before or after the controller asks for your budget template? Things like that. These are the things that we try to get into in coaching conversations, in the framework itself, and certainly in my book.
So let's say that someone, I literally spoke with someone about an hour and a half ago that I had connected with on LinkedIn, and I had communicated with over the years. Literally, this was 6 years ago. And then we had a couple email or LinkedIn conversations. And then she connected with someone else on my LinkedIn and goes, "Oh, my word. Hey, I know this person." And so we reconnected about 2 weeks ago. She bought a copy of my book. She messaged me last week and said, "I read it in one sitting. Loved it. I've got highlights and underlines." And she set up a coaching call today or called the chat, and she just set up one of my packages. I say all that to say this. Many times people start with, "Oh, you've taken what's in your mind and put it into this book. Yay." Well, you've got the book, right? And what I would say is, from there, you should have people that are underlining and highlighting and dog-earing your pages, going, "Ooh, this is good, this is good." But there's gonna be some of those people that go, "Am I doing it right? Am I thinking the right way? You told me how to create my SOP, but is this one good?" So you have some packages where you will come alongside them, right? And then you would coach and consult them. And then that is such a good companion to starting off with your book.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I'm in the process of doing right now is putting the final touches to something I'm calling the Leadership SOPs Playbook. So that will be really more of a workbook, journal. It'll be chock full of some best practice leadership SOPs to get people started, but also some blank ones. So, to be coming, right, on that one. But it's also how I work in my own practice to support people as they look for both ideas, what is a leadership SOP? By the way, I start with the idea that it's any intentional routine thing that you do that's meant to help structure, operate, or perfect the communities of effort you need to succeed. So it's really an intentional habit. and it doesn't need to be glamorous and genius. It starts with things like, how often do I do one-on-ones? What about skip levels with the people who report to the people that report to me? What about my peers? What about extended peers? How do I build trust that I need in the organization before I need it? That kind of stuff.
I think we can just go so many places, but I love, how certain words just resonate with you, and it's like, ooh, a blueprint, a checklist, tell me what to do, what's the next step, and a playbook. That's just like, okay, man, when that comes out, just guide me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I think that's going to be so neat when you come up, because now that becomes the companion guide to the book. The book talks about the concepts. Here comes the playbook to go integrate it or implement it. So that's really, really cool. When you work with people that may have started trying to do this on their own, what are some of the things that you've noticed that they gave it the old college try, but it didn't really work out very well, and then you had to guide them a little bit better? But what are some of the common misconceptions and missteps so that maybe someone could, get past that quickly?
Yeah, I think one of them is trying to look at the framework, which, the easiest way I could say it is that it's essentially a framework for summarizing all of the components of organizational effectiveness. And so it's massive. And one of the common problems is trying to take a framework like this and develop overnight, 150 leadership SOPs that help you do all these things. That's a surefire way to fail.
Yes.
So that is really one thing that I see often, where people are shooting themselves in the foot with the amount of change, and they're trying to go from 0 to 1,000 miles an hour in a small gap, and they're simply going to overwhelm themselves. Find that they've bitten off way more than they could possibly chew.
Well, that makes so much sense because, a great book that I've read that maybe you have as well, called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. Have you ever heard of that one?
I haven't, but I'm going to take a note here and make sure I take a look at it.
Really, really good. Building a Story Brand, Donald Miller. One of the things he talks about is our brains are wired in such a way that, and we don't have time, we don't have lots of, attention span. So our brains want us to quickly and easily come to decisions. And if something is perceived as too much to consume, or if it's going to take too many quote unquote mental calories, your brain just shuts off. You're like, ugh. So it's exactly what you just said. Don't try to do everything all at once. Crawl, walk, run. If you needed to get back into shape and start working out, but you haven't worked out in 3 years, you certainly should not do 3-hour workouts 6 days a week. It's way too much. So I love that response that you gave, and I highly recommend read that book. I've probably read it 5 times. I want to wrap up with this question, and I alluded to it at the very beginning. Your title of the book is From Expert to Executive. Shouldn't that be the other way around? Shouldn't you be an executive and then make some mistakes and learn, and then you're the expert? And I know that's not the case, but tell us why it's titled From Expert to Executive.
Sure. Well, it really relates to the structure of the book itself and the profile of most of my clients. So the book starts with an introduction for me, which talks a little bit about my journey to the leadership SOPs framework and methodology. And then the 10 chapters of it are really based on a fictitious company called Tecular Biologics and the scientists who work within it. And these scientists are experts at what they do, but they are either have found themselves to be executives or they are on the path to being an executive, and they're trying to figure out what is this thing called leadership, and can they do it? Will they do it? Will they be any good at it? And the basic experience of the book is understanding this journey, and understanding, a fundamental truth that really I put out there in the first sentence of the whole book, which is every step on the journey from expert to executive leads away from your craft. So it's really this idea of letting go of the team's work and perhaps what's driven you most of your life, and embracing a new purpose, which is embracing the work of leading.
I love it. Well, Ed, it's just such a pleasure talking with you today. You've got such a great, succinct message, and I just want anyone interested in picking up a copy of your book to know what's the best way they can reach out and connect with you and learn more, as well as pick up a copy of your book.
Sure. We're going to find it easily on Amazon.com, From Expert to Executive, Mastering the SOPs of Leading. And you certainly can find out more information about the Leadership SOPs just by going on leadershipsops.com. And I love it when people find, follow, and engage me on LinkedIn. So you can find me at ed-tyson-SOPs.
Awesome. Well, Ed, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure talking with you today.
Well, thank you, sir. I really enjoyed it.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.